Hi guys, it is Thursday. You just finished your Systems of Equations word problem quiz, and now you are going to take notes on a new concept called two-way tables. Okay, you were asked yesterday to bring your textbook to class, earbuds, and hopefully either you have a device or you are using one of our iPads. Okay, make sure your earbuds are in because everybody will be watching this video at different times, and some people still may be taking their quiz. So please be respectful and don't have the volume up very high, like the way you listen to your music. Okay, now, as I said, we are taking notes on two-way tables. I need you to turn to page 629 in your textbook. Excuse me. Now, as you listen to this video and go through this section, you are responsible for writing down everything I write down and completing the examples. You will have some homework problems at the end of this lesson. Also, you can pause this video at any time. I know at times I speak fast, and if you are not used to me, then you may get a little frustrated. So pause it, and then you can take your time and write down the work and also understand what I'm saying. Now, two-way frequency tables. You actually have seen one of these on a activity that we did earlier in the year. Your teacher may or may not have discussed it. They may have just skipped over it. We will go to that actual activity and look at that one problem. Okay? Now, one thing you need to make sure you do, okay, as always, and I know your teachers have stressed to you how important it is for you to read the problem in its entirety. Okay, we are not sure the exact format of the milestones or the EOG. Okay, we have a feeling it's going to be a lot of reading, so you need to make sure that you read and you're answering what's being asked of you. Also, you might find some pertinent information in a blurb next to a chart. For example, this one. Most of you look at this chart and say, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. But there's a piece of information that you need in order to complete this Venn diagram. Now, a Venn diagram, you know, compares and contrasts two things. You've dealt with these in numerous classes over the course of middle school and in elementary. So let's get to it. Okay, it says the data from the survey of 440 students are shown in the table. The students were asked whether or not they were on the honor roll and whether or not they played a sport. So here's your chart. Now what's important is the 440 students. Okay, that is the total in our survey. Now, in a Venn diagram, as you know, this section right here is where the two overlap or where they intersect. They have in common. Here would be just sports, just honor roll. So now, let's look at our chart and fill in our Venn diagram. Only on the honor roll, okay, 115. And I'm going to mark through it because I know I'm using it. So 115. Only play a sport, 45. Play a sport and are on the honor roll. That's where they overlap. Now, as you know, you have a calculator, but hopefully you can add these up and notice that they add up to be shy of your 440. It's only 410 students. And what that means is there are 30 students out here outside the Venn diagram, still in the universal set, okay? Which a universal set is all of it, your total number of students that are surveyed. Okay, and what this represents, 30 people aren't on the honor roll, nor do they play a sport. Okay, now, relative frequency is the ratio. Well, we know a ratio is a fraction of the value of a subtotal to the value of the total. Okay, so we're looking for a ratio. Now, anytime you see the word relative, you are always going to think to yourself, okay, they want me to write it as a decimal. So here I'm writing a decimal, and the ratio that I'm going to write is the subtotal to the total. And it says, what is the relative frequency of a student that is on the honor roll and plays a sport? So, is on the honor roll. We're talking about this section right here. Is on the honor roll. Okay, I don't need this. Okay, and plays a sport. So it's 250 out of how many people are on the honor roll? 365. And then you write that as a decimal. So 250 divided by 365. gives you 0.68, and round to the hundredths. Okay. Okay. Let's move to the next page. Now, a two-way table shows the data from one sample group as it relates to two different categories. Okay, so here we have a two-way table using the same information that we used in the Venn diagram. Plays a sport, does not play a sport. On the honor roll, not on the honor roll. Okay, so using those numbers, we could plug in play a sport and on the honor roll, we knew it was 250. Does not play a sport, okay, and on the honor roll, that was the 115. Okay, because we knew 365 total were on the honor roll. Okay, okay, so right here, okay, this is the data. This data right there represents something called a joint frequency. Okay, joint, playing a sport and on the honor roll. That's what that cell represents. Playing a sport, not on the honor roll. Does not play a sport, but is on the honor roll. Does not play a sport, not on the honor roll. And if you notice, this was our number that was outside our Venn diagram. Okay. Now, the terminology that I use, this joint frequency, okay, you are not going to, it's not a concept that you need as far as the vocabulary for this year, but you will see it next year. So we are thinking if we go ahead and introduce it to you, it'll make next year so much easier. Okay. Right here, okay, this is in the margin. This is called marginal frequencies. Okay, you always have to have a total column. Okay, if you do not have a total column, then that's the first thing you do when you work these problems. Create your total column. So then how do I fill this in? 250 plus 115 is your 365. That was the total number, looking back at here, that I circled, 365. Okay, not on the honor roll was 75. Your total is 440. Now if you look, these are rows, these are columns, these are rows. Your column adds up to 440, your row adds up to 440. And it should. If it doesn't, then you need to go back and figure out where you made a mistake. This should always be your total sample space. The total number of surveyed, your total sample space is 440. Okay. So now let's start filling in some charts. Okay. Felipe surveyed students at a school. He found that 78 students own a cell phone. And 57 of those students own an MP3 player. There are 13 students that do not own a cell phone, but own an MP3 player. 9 students do not own either device. Construct a two-way table summarizing the data. Okay, now, sorry, I'm going to get those out of the way. Okay, so now we need to look at what we're given and look at our chart. And we want to fill in the missing pieces. It's like a puzzle. And a lot of you can do this with a breeze. Okay? Well, first of all, okay, you got some information. If I know these two, I can add up to find this part of my marginal frequency. Okay? So now, 57 and 13. Okay? If you look to see, it says 57 of those students own an MP3 player. Okay? And own a cell phone. So 57 is an MP3 and a cell phone. Okay, there are 13 students that do not own a cell phone but own an MP3. So own an MP3, no cell phone. Okay, 9 students do not own either device. So this cell represents neither. Okay, and it says he found 78 students own a cell phone. So 78 own a cell phone. So now, just you deciding, okay, well, what's here? Well, if this is 57 and this is 78, I can subtract and get 21 people do not have an MP3 but have a cell phone. So now really all I have to figure out, as I said earlier, you always have to have your total columns or your marginal frequencies. Because right now we have no clue how many people were surveyed. Okay? But we can find out. So 57 and 13 is 70. 21 and 9 is 30. 78, okay, well, we need to figure out this one. So it's 13 and 9, which is 22. 78 and 22 is 100, and then verify it. 70 and 30 is also 100. So based on this, you know 100 people were surveyed, because that is our total sample space. Okay. Now, I can ask you some questions based on this data. Okay, and we're going to get into some questions. Okay, but right now, 57 out of our 100 have an MP3 and have a cell phone. 9 out of our 100 total don't have either. Okay. Okay, now what I'd like for you to do is pause the video and create your chart. So right now you're pausing the video and you are completing the chart, and then I will have the answers up here to make sure that we understand. Okay, so now you're back with me and you should have your chart filled out. Like this. Okay, and let's talk about it for a second. There are 150 children at the summer camp. That is your sample space. 71 signed up for swimming. Okay, well, where's swimming? Swimming is this row. Okay, 71 signed up for swimming. There were a total of 62 children that signed up for canoeing. 62 signed up for canoeing, and 28 of them also signed up for swimming. Constructed to, and the 28, it says, and 28 of them, so of them is talking about the people who signed up for canoeing, also signed up for swimming. So 28 of the 62 signed up for canoeing and swimming. So now, using subtraction and addition, you can figure out the rest. You had the 71 and you had the 28. You can subtract to get the 43. You had the 28, the 62, you can come up with a 34. You know 150, subtract 62 from 150, that gives you your 88. Okay. Next, okay, interpreting relative frequencies. First off, I just put in the word relative frequency. What does that mean? I'm wanting a decimal. Very important. Okay, so now we know we're going to have a chart and we're going to have some kind of decimals in here. Okay, so now here we have another, obviously, example dealing with MP3s and cell phones. Okay. Now, it says find and interpret the relative frequencies of students in the survey from example 1 by row. I want to find the relative frequency by row. So I want a decimal. Okay, now by row, remember row is this way. Okay, and when I'm talking by row, I'm looking for a decimal, which means I need to have a ratio. So if I'm looking for cell phone, those who own a cell phone and have an MP3 player, there's 53 out of the 78. Now the reason why we're using 78 as opposed to the total sample space is because that word right there, by row. When it's by row, you use the total for that row. So 57 over 78, and if you look down here, you get 0.73. Okay, so then if I want to find the no MP3 and cell phone, it's 21 out of the 78, which is represented here. Okay. No cell phone is 13 out of 22, so it's 0.59. No cell phone, no MP3 is 9 out of 22, so it's represented there. Now, when you add 0.73 and 0.27, you get 1.00. Now, there may be times because of rounding, you might be slightly off, but you should be close to 1. Okay? Okay, now what I want you to do is pause this, and I want you to do part B, or question B. Okay, so you should be back with me, and this is asking you to find and interpret the relative frequency, okay, decimal, ding, 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 okay, of the students in the survey by column. Now, remember, columns are up and down, okay, columns are up and down. Undefined slope. Rows are zero slope. They're horizontal. Okay, so if you get your rows and columns mixed up, then you've messed up the problem. So I want it by column. So to find MP3 and cell phone, it's 57 out of your total of 70. Okay, if you have to, when it says by column, cover up everything else and then just do your percentages. If it's by row, cover up everything else and only show one row. Okay, and that winds up being approximately 0.81. This is 13 out of 70, which is approximately 0.19. 0.81 and 0.19 is 1. 21 out of your total is approximately 0.70. 9 out of 30 is approximately 0.30, which is also 0.1 or 1.0. Okay, take a minute and I want you to complete the first example. Okay, and you should be back with me, and your chart should look like this. Okay. There were 200 people in your survey, and here is all the information. So if I wanted to ask you some questions about relative frequencies, okay, by row and by column, if I was doing, say an example would be, what is the relative frequency by row of those who agree with the rules and are males? Okay, I want by row. Okay, agree with the rules and males, so 38 out of 108. Okay. Okay, number 2, I want you to complete this table. Now be careful because it's asking by row. Okay, so pause the video and finish this. And what you should have gotten is 0.21, 0.23, 0.79, 0.77. This was 62, which is 1.00, and this is 88, which is 1.00. And to find your grand total, your marginal frequencies, remember, is that right there, 150 total. Add up 62 and 88, add up 33 and 117. Okay, now, your homework, what you're going to work on independently, is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Turn the page over. 5, 7, 8. Turn the page over. 9, 10, 11. And then 14, 15, and 16. Now, I made a reference at the beginning of this video that you've seen this before. Going back to our Unit 6 review, you were told to skip this question. Okay? Now, so this is a two-way frequency table of students, let's say, who like classical music and dislike classical music and play an instrument and do not play an instrument. Now, first thing you need to do before you even look at any questions, okay, what is this chart missing? Okay, well, hopefully you said the marginal frequencies. You do not have a total column, and in order to answer questions, you need a total column. So you'll fill it in and create a total column. Okay, so 15 and 2 is 17, 3 and 25 is 28, 15 and 3 is 18, 2 and 25 is 27. Okay, and then when you add it up, 17 and 28 is 45, 27 and 18 is also 45. So this right here tells you there were 45 people surveyed. That is your sample space. Okay, then you can answer whatever questions. Now, this question here says, what is the relative frequency of students who like classical music and play an instrument to the total number of students who play an instrument? So first you need to find the cell, the joint frequency, and if you remember, joint frequency is right here. Okay, so what am I looking for? What is the relative frequency, again, decimal, of those who like classical music and play an instrument? So, like classical, play an instrument. So I'm looking at here. But now, am I looking out of the total for the row, the total for the column, or the total of those surveyed? So you have to finish reading the question. To the total number of students who play an instrument. So now you've got to figure out, where do I find the total number of people who play an instrument? Okay, that would be by row. So this question makes you think a little bit. The questions that we did in our textbook said by row, by column. Now I'm telling you, okay, I'm looking at those who play an instrument. So I'm looking right here. So it's 15 out of 17, which then is 0.88. Okay? Now, another word, because I talked about marginal frequency, I talked about joint frequency, this type of question is also considered a conditional. I'm putting a condition on it. I'm not looking at the total. Here, I'm only looking at those who play an instrument, and like out of those who play an instrument, how many like classical music? Okay? So you learned some vocabulary today that you may not see on the EOG, but you will definitely see it next year, and hopefully you may not remember everything about it, but at least it'll ring a bell. Okay, make sure you have your homework finished for tomorrow, and you guys have a great night. Again, this video will be up on the blog. You can watch it as many times as you want. And y'all have a great night.